Wow, it's been so easy using Anchor for my podcast needs. I can edit it very easily on my cell phone. I can also use it on my computer, which is great. I can upload new pictures for each podcast if I need to. And the thing that I really appreciate it as a fledgling podcaster is that it's free. So I highly recommend it.
Welcome to EQ Above IQ, Parenting with Emotional Intelligence and Healing the Inner Child. My name is Trina Casey and I'm your host, and thank you for joining me. Again, thank you for listening and welcome to this episode. I am going to talk about a subject. A listener asked me a question and I felt it was a really important question as I explore emotional intelligence, not only for ourselves to help raise emotionally intelligent children. I also have some pretty good tips that can help you even accelerate that process as you go through your process. So today I'm going to talk about how we're going to raise emotionally intelligent children. And of course, the most important thing is that we model that behavior because they are our mirror. Our children are our mini me's running around. So as you give to them, they shall receive and give to you. So that is, of course, number one. And it's part of the reason why I also call this healing the inner child, because once we go through that process of healing, we can also create opportunities to teach our children behaviors and ways of being that we may not have gotten as children ourselves. So first I want to outline some of the benefits of emotional intelligence and with children in particular. A higher EQ is actually linked to have a higher IQ. And this is the reason why I call it EQ above IQ. Because children with higher levels of emotional intelligence perform better on those dreaded standardized tests, but they also just tend to have higher grades. They have better relationships because when you're emotionally intelligent, it helps manage conflict and develop deeper friendships. And as we already know, adults with high emotional intelligence also have better relationships in both their personal and professional careers and lives. So that's one of the benefits. Childhood EQ is also linked to higher success in adulthood. I mean, it makes complete sense, right? There was a study done by the American Journal of Public Health, and it was done over a 13-year span, that a child's social and emotional skills in kindergarten may predict lifelong success. So it's really important that we get that EQ base as young as possible, because children who are able to share, cooperate, and follow basic directions with, of course, healthy expectations, because remember, children are biological and we need our teachers to understand and teach accordingly, that when they have certain temper tantrums and things like that, they're doing what is biologically normal and hardwired in their brain, basically. So anyways, these kids are more likely to succeed in higher level education. And it also just improves mental health. Children with higher emotional intelligence are less likely to experience depression or other mental illnesses. So that's just a few of the benefits. And I also think it's a more harmonious energy within themselves when you can actually have better self-awareness and go, oh, I'm feeling this or that in my body, and therefore I need to regulate my emotions. Now, don't expect it to be perfect because, as I always say, I don't believe in perfection. But if we start modeling that, of course, and we teach our children that, you will see that your child will be actually just happier all around. So one of the things that is really good and really helpful that you can do to help your kids become more emotionally intelligent, excuse me, I'm going through an allergy season here, is that you need to help them see their biology in action. And how do you do that? You label emotions. When you are talking to your child about their reaction and how they're feeling about things, please use words such as angry, upset, are you shy? That must be painful. I had a situation happen with my son this last week at school where he arrived late, actually just 2 minutes late, but it wasn't told to me that they go in a few minutes before the designated time that they told us. So I had to explain, well, you have to give us the time to actually be there, not the time you're going to start in your classroom. So anyways, he got locked out and he really panicked because he also had forgotten his responsibility of charging his phone or his watch. And that's how he communicates with me. But I also am using it as a lesson of responsibility in that he's in charge of charging it himself and making sure that the bars don't go down. So even though I had reminded him that evening, he chose not to do it. And so this was a consequence. Now, he was obviously very upset when I got a call from the school. And the first thing I said to him and said, oh, wow, that must have been scary. That must have been, you felt probably pretty upset. Wow, I really am sorry you had to go through that. What could we do differently next time to make sure that this doesn't happen again? This type of language expresses that you care about what's going on with them, even if it was really their fault. In the morning time, we struggle getting moving with our kids, but there's some empathy around that. And as long as you're modeling empathy, which is a very important step with your child, they'll learn how to be empathetic as well. So validating their feelings it's just, I know it seems like common sense, but it is not something that happens very commonly with children, and especially of the old way. I like to call it the archaic way of parenting, because that time was very much focused on the Industrial Revolution. And I mean, during that time, kids were actually working in industrial complex. They were working in manufacturing companies. And do you think their feelings mattered? They were tools. So that kind of mentality has been perpetuated for years. And even though the UN passed the United Nations Children's Rights Charter, there are some countries who are not on that charter. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the United States is not one of them. There's only 2 that aren't. So basically, it just outlines that children have rights. And so validating their feelings is a way of showing them that they do have some rights. And also, we can also teach them how to use the right language. For example, if your kid is crying because they can't do something, or they didn't clean their room, or whatever the case may be, you can teach them to say, hey, you feel upset when you don't get to do what you want to do. But sometimes you have to work to get to what you want to do, or earn it per se. But kids will cry and scream, and they'll do all their biological things to get out of that. But I really, really want to press upon that emotional intelligence and empathy is not about not creating healthy boundaries and not creating certain standards of interaction, because it makes sense that they'll go out in the world and they're going to have to earn trust. They're going to have to earn money. They're going to have to do a lot of things that they have to put effort forth to receive. So another important tip is you have to model the appropriate way to express feelings. Of course, if you're screaming and yelling, that's what your kid is going to do. So like I said, we are their model and they are our mirror. So remember that. So you're going to have to learn very basic skills to regulate yourself. And I may have talked about some of these things in my very first episode of EQ Above IQ, but I feel like it's always good to go back and wow, we're on episode 16 now or 17. Yeah. And revisit these things as a reminder, because when I remind you, I remind myself. And so another really important thing is that you're teaching very healthy coping skills, whether that's breath work. You might say, hey, let's relax a bit, breathe. I tell my son to breathe, and because we all have the tendency to start doing that shallow breathing when we get angry. But even just sitting down and coloring in a book or playing some soothing music, which is kind of my go-to anyway, helps. I used to do this thing with lotion where when he got upset, I'd say, come on, let's get the lotion. And this is my love lotion. And I had a little heart written on it. And so I say, here, I think you need some love lotion, because I'm giving it a form. So I say, when he was upset, I'll say, I'm going to put some love lotion on you and let you know that I love you. And because sometimes when they get into their amygdala hijacks, they just, it takes them some time to come down. So any way that you can use the senses to bring them back to regulation always helps. And it also helps you as well, because we sometimes forget as adults that we are operating more in the prefrontal brain. And when our kids have these very strong emotions, they're in the reptilian brain and they're doing their fight, flight, and all that. And they're just like, and we're looking at them like, why are you tripping? I just asked you to pick that up. And, you've seen these videos on YouTube where they are like actually kind of ridiculing their kids by videotaping them saying, I asked him to pick up his shoe. And I really want to discourage that. I do. That is going to be an image of your child that's on the internet forever. And what you're doing is you're making fun of them in the public. You're ridiculing them. And that will come back to bite you someday. So before you start making fun of your child on social media, take a deep breath and find a different way. Find a more loving, more empathetic way. I really want to move us away from the ridicule type of punishment for actual natural responses to many things that may seem ridiculous at the time, but usually somebody saying pick up their shoe or something small is actually connected to something bigger that happened maybe during the day. And that happens. It's like you're doing what you think is just a normal thing, but earlier in the day they had a really strong emotional response about maybe somebody bullying them, maybe they fell down, maybe they felt embarrassed, whatever the case is. I always ask the question, so what really happened? Are you really upset about picking up the shoe? Or did something else happen earlier? And that also just goes back into validating their feelings and showing that you care enough to try to go back and rewind to figure out the source of their unhappiness, because that is what happens with adults too. Okay? So let's not ridicule anymore, people. And then developing problem-solving skills. A really important part of emotional intelligence is learning how to solve problems and solve conflicts. So one of the things that you can do, for example, in my situation where my son got locked out of the school, I said, first thing I want you to always do is not panic. Keep your breath. Take a deep breath, because as soon as you panic, you start making bad decisions or you start getting scared. And so what you have to do is keep your wits about you, recognize where you are you safe? Asking some very good questions, fact-based questions. Okay, am I being harmed? No. Am I safe? For the most part, yes. How could I get into the school? And I said there was the gate. You could just jumped over that and gone up the front stairs. But everything is confusing right now because of the COVID. And like many parents, I'm concerned about them actually being in school. But there's been certain protocols put in place at my son's school where we are staggered at times on where the kids come in, and the location where they go in is different than it was before. And so it's just small things. We'll see how effective it is, but always walk through the possibilities of what they could have done differently in order to keep themselves calm and to think better. So once you have identified 5 possible solutions, let them kind of assess the pros and the cons of each one, and then encourage them to pick the best option. So children make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And this is something, like I said, we're all children just walking around in adult suits pretending we have it all figured out. We actually improve our ability to solve skills when we're walking through this process with them. So provide the guidance, but help your kids think critically. And that's a skill set that is being very much lost nowadays. And then really, most importantly, please make emotional intelligence a goal, a daily goal for yourself and your family, and use your children's mistakes as opportunities to grow better for yourself, and use your own mistakes as opportunities to grow for yourself. So this parenting gig is not for the faint of heart, and healing your inner child in that process can be doubly stressing, because we're all just trying to figure this out. And there's definitely been no handbook. There's lots of great research, and Dan Siegel's book, The Whole Brain Child, is one of my favorite books. So if you want to go get a book on the psychology and the neuroscience of your children, please pick that one up and read it. It's been one of my favorite reads, and I go back and reference it from time to time just to kind of remind myself that my inner child may or may not have gotten some of the things that could have made my adult journey a lot easier. So all of this, I think one of the most beautiful things about children is, as an adult, as you have children, is that it's such an amazing opportunity for growth for you. It really, really makes your healing process accelerate if you embrace it. It's like seeing all of the wrongs that happened in your life and the opportunity to right them with your own child. It's a very powerful gift. When you think about, when I personally think about my own childhood, just had I been asked certain questions about my feelings, or just even feeling validated that it was okay for me to have those feelings, and rather than shut down and said, no, I'm the adult, my feelings are more important than yours. What a difference it would have made in my relationships, my choices of relationships, everything. Yeah, the ability to regulate myself. I tended to do that pretty well anyway as a child, probably through the process of shutdown. But it was like some of those skill sets, I basically just would go to my room. But if I had been allowed to say, I'm feeling this or I'm feeling that, because I was a very talkative child, as you can imagine. But luckily for me, I had external resources to be able to be heard. One of my biggest gifts is that I had a best friend at the time, and her mother was that mom that would listen, that would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, mija." She was Latina, and just really encouraging me to talk about my feelings, and that is an important thing. So even if you have a difficult time finding ways to express feelings or talk about feelings, and you can't acknowledge that, please find a resource for your child. Please find a resource for your child to be able to talk about and express their feelings deeply in order to feel validated, because they will go into adults that are much more confident. So, yeah, I appreciate you listening through to the end of this short episode. I try to answer questions as soon as possible. And if this seemed like a little bit of a repeat, like I said, reminders are always great. We need constant, gentle reminders, which reminds me to tell you about the children's clothing line that I have on thisreallifebooks.com, where I've created some t-shirts and other items to remind us that I regulate when you regulate, or I'm healing my inner child. Be kind. These are resources for adults for children to raise conscious parents. And there's adult shirts as well that say, don't grind a line, because alignment is far more important than the tendency to work ourselves to death. And once you get in alignment with your purpose and you get alignment with your energy, guess what? Everything flows to you. It's just alignment. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't put the effort. It just means that you're putting the effort in the right place, and that effort turns into joy rather than pain. So go check that out. Also, if any of you out there have any questions in regards to parenting, or you just have some questions in general, there's a lot of stuff going on. So I've created a lot of different resources through my coaching, This Real Life Coaching, for you to ask me some questions, even around the subject of what's happening around equality and race and Black Lives Matter. I'm here to answer those questions in an unbiased, hopefully create a more comfortable platform for that. And of course, most important, and the reason why I started This Real Life Books, is my books that teach the 5 principles of emotional intelligence through an engaging story that you can read with your child, help improve the vocabulary, help answer some really great questions that I place at the back of the book to further explore the story. And go check those out. Galaxy's Well, I Love Pink, and Leo the Technicolor Panther, and many more to come. It has been a trying time financially for everyone, and my production process has slowed down because everything else has slowed down. So I will be getting other books out as soon as possible, and with your support, I hope that will happen even faster. But thank you for listening and letting me live within my purpose and share that with you, and hopefully inspire others to live within their purpose. And I appreciate you so much. Blessings. Have a blessed day.